and citizen collective action and their role in the digitalized energy system of 2030. It will also seek to highlight what we have learned from the COVID-19 pandemic and how we can continue engaging citizens in the green energy transition of the future. I'm going to go through a few housekeeping rules. You ask questions in the chat and preferably specify to who. If you need help, also use the chat. And this event is recorded. You cannot unmute yourself. Instead, use the chat. This is the agenda and the speaker presentation. We have Cristiana Macitelli, Policy Officer at DG Energy, Stanislas Debermont, Development Manager at Rescoop and Chair of the Bridge Consumer and Citizen Engagement Working Group representing the Compile project. Diego Casado, researcher in computer science, Diusto, representing the Parity and Y project. Thomas N. Mikkelsen, CEO and founder, Gecko Global, and chair of the Bridge Joint Communication Task Force representing eLand, iElectrics, and Synergy projects. And me, myself, I'm Mats Tibon, strategic communicator at IMCG International, representing the FlexiGrid project. I put the grant agreement number here because we have 2 FlexiGrid projects within Bridge. This is the one with 864048. First speaker, Cristiana, you're welcome to join us.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Do you see my share screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, as Matt said, I'm Cristiana Marchitelli. I am from DG Energy, the unit dealing with research, innovation, competitiveness, and digitalization. And I'm really pleased to be here with you today to speak of a timely subject, which is the work of the European Commission and DG Energy in integrating consumers and citizens, so the human and social dimension into the EU and energy policy making. In my presentation today, we'll touch upon the Bridge Initiative, through which we are hosting the session today through the Joint Communication Task Force. And then I will briefly describe the ongoing and upcoming initiatives of the Commission to deliver on a citizen-centric energy system. So for those who don't know Bridge, Bridge is a European Commission initiative launched 5 years ago in 2016, which unites projects from the Research and Innovation Framework Program Horizon 2020 on smart grids, energy storage, islands, and digitalization. The aim is for them to create and have a structured view of cross-cutting issues that are encountered by those projects and that may constitute an obstacle to innovation. So the aim of the initiative per se is to provide feedback, lessons learned, and field experience from the participating projects to help overcome these identified barriers. And in the past 5 years, 88 projects, 56 of which are currently ongoing, have had this structured dialogue among themselves and with regulators and authorities, so to provide policymakers with a coordinated recommendation on how to maximize the impact for an effective innovation deployment. And how do they do it? They do it through these 4 different working groups and task forces of interest. They meet once a year into the General Assemblies, and the objectives of these meetings are to create a better understanding of what the Bridge projects are and learn from each other and to help establish an even closer cooperation. And as you can see, we have 4 different working groups. The regulation working group is working on products, services, and coordination models and market design. And for the current 2021 year, is working also on the role of energy communities as service provider. The data management working group is working on communication infrastructure. So the framework of data exchange in a way that's interoperable and secure, so touches upon also cybersecurity and data privacy issues. And the business model working group is working on identifying new and innovative business models from the project demonstrations and the different use cases that we have in the projects of Bridge, but also evaluating the existing ones. And then the last one, which is of particular relevance for today's session, is the Consumers and Citizens Working Group and why it is important for today. We know the consumer engagement angle in R&I projects is very important because we know that the choices that every single one of us does are heavily shaped of what we can call the energy environment surrounding us. So all these collective physical, socioeconomic, and political surroundings, and all the opportunities and conditions that can influence our everyday behavior and energy behavior also in our roles, because we can be an individual consumer, we can be a producer, we can be prosumers or member of an energy community. So the work that the working group is doing in understanding what is driving consumer engagement and what are the triggers what are the elements that trigger the environmentally friendly behavior is very relevant. The way it was structured at the very beginning was to do just that. So to have analysis on the different segments of cultural, geographical, and social dimension of behavior. But the way the working group is developing is looking at how to concretely support the R&I projects to better understanding the engagement of citizens through collective action. So the group has focused on understanding, strategizing, and organizing these collective actions of consumers and citizens. And the goal is really to transform the vision and the interaction with consumers for R&I projects. Stanislas will later detail how the working group is structured and talk more about the work, but let me just say that in 2020, the group has identified the gaps and the specific needs of Bridge projects as it relates to citizen engagement. And in 2021, the efforts will be devoted to proposing solutions to build community-based engagement strategies and promote best practices. And the fact that we are here today to talk about it and actually sharing the knowledge from the project demonstrates that we're going to the right direction. I leave you with the Bridge initiatives, just reminding you that we have new reports of the 4 different working groups that are ready to be downloaded in the Bridge website. So go have a look if you are curious to know more about the projects. Now I will go to what the European Union can do to support the transition to an integration, even more integration of citizens into R&I programming. What we do is to provide the funding, the coordination, and the information throughout the different funding programs. And I'm focusing now today into the R&I framework programs. What I wanted to bring to your attention is that in Cluster 5 of Horizon Europe, devoted to energy, mobility, and climate, we have paid special attention to integrating the citizens and human dimension, because we know that social and technological dimension of innovation are strongly interlinked, and they can hardly be separated from each other in explaining the social change. And we're doing it also in the destination devoted to smart grid-ready calls, because for them to be successful and to get the public acceptance of the different energy technologies that we are developing, the social and behavioral dimension simply needs to be included in all stages of project design. Here in the slide, I am signaling you an interesting call that is opening in a few days, and I just wanted to flag that all the work ongoing and all the project results that we have from Bridge also will feed into a deeper understanding of what are the RNI needs, and would of course feed into the next 2023-2024 programming period. The participation of the civil society in all of this, in the co-creation of the projects, is pivotal. I mean, we see that the integration of social innovation, SSH, in Horizon Europe is relevant to address the challenges now more than ever, because we have current and future challenges that the European Union is facing, and President von der Leyen has said it last month, that go beyond energy, that touch areas like health and care, also in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, the twin and green digital transition. I mean, we have a lot going on. And of course, of the COVID, we will talk more about later with Thomas. So the integration of citizens is of particular importance. I just wanted to bring to your attention current initiative DG Energy is undertaking, which is called the Digitalization of Energy Action Plan. The action plan has been, we have been mandated under the energy system integration strategy, because the strategy has proposed the adoption of a system-wide digitalization of energy action plan as one of the key actions to accelerate implementation of the digital solution in the energy system. So what we are currently doing is to try to create an overall narrative around the different legal and policy instruments, both fitting into the Green Deal overarching objectives, but also the Europe Fit for Digital Age objectives. So the action plan is really putting itself at the crossroad of the two main political European Commission priorities. As you can see, we have 5 main areas of intervention at the moment, all linked to understanding and provide a solution to the challenges that relate to cybersecurity, data access and governance, data protection and privacy, and the growing consumption of the ICT sector. I mean, the aim of the action plan is to create a new market for digital energy services, a market that's fair, non-discriminatory, competitive, and that has the citizens at the core. As you can see here, I mean, the first action would be an overarching action to have the development of a European digital digital data infrastructure, to have a smooth and transparent data exchange possible for the benefit of all the actors across the value chain. So from the DSO, TSO to the end consumer. Then we'll have the citizens empowerment dimension. I will talk about that later. We have the uptake of digital technologies. We will look across the whole value chain to understand the RNI needs, but also what we need to do to have the market uptake of the best available digital solution that we have already in the market, the cybersecurity area, and the carbon footprint on ICT. The area number 2 is relevant for today's session because, I mean, digitalization and digitally enabled consumer are, according to us, a powerful source to drive the energy transition towards climate neutrality to 2050. And what we want to do in this area is to identify how can digitalization help consumers to engage more actively in the energy market, but also identify how digitalization of energy can make consumers' life better as the system decarbonizes, because we need to reach the objectives. I wanted to signal to you the timeline. We have just launched the public consultation, so if you are eager to participate, you're free to do so. You have time until the 24th of January 2022, but also you have other opportunities to engage with us for the action plan. The first of which is also in the framework of USEF, a policy session scheduled for the 27th of October. But also there are other opportunities that in ENER we are providing consumers and citizens to engage with us and to participate actively into the energy policy making. I mean, we have the local initiatives, the Covenant of Mayors, the Islands Initiative, we have an OPLA, no, Alala, this is just, we have the upcoming Energy Community Repository and Rural Community Advisory Hub. It is important because it aims at assuring action at local and regional level so that it creates proximity with citizens and ensure behavioral change to actively promote the energy transition really at local level. And then we have recurring events that you can engage with, USEF Dublin Forum, and all of these are opportunities for you to have an active engagement with the Commission, with the policymaker to shape a citizen-centric energy system of the future. Thank you very much.
You're muted, Mats.
Thank you very much. Yeah, what I said was, thank you very much, Cristiana Macitelli, Policy Officer at the DG Energy. A lot of interesting calls coming up. Next speaker, Stanislas Debermont. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to take just a second to share my slides with you. Apologies. Here you go. So, my name is Stanislas Debermont. I work with the COMPA project, which is one of the H2020 projects on energy islands. And specifically, we look at what is the role of citizens in those energy islands. I'm also the chair of the Bridge Consumer and Citizen Engagement Working Group, which means that my role is to carry, present, emphasize the work that is being done by all the projects and all the partners that are part of the Bridge Initiative, and specifically on Consumer and Citizen Engagement Working Group. So my goal today is to explain a little bit the steps that we took with the working group to understand how to put citizens at the center of European research projects. That takes place in both in terms of discussions internally inside the initiative, and also providing tools and methodologies for research innovation projects across Europe. Based on what Cristiana told you, you can now see how we are taking a space in the Bridge Initiative. Thank you very much, Cristiana, for that and for the kind words on the working group. The idea now for me is to show you, one, what is the goal of the working group, and two, how we organize it, and three, what are the results of our work. So first things first, I'm going to repeat a little bit of what Cristiana just said, which is the scope that we decided to take as a working group, which is around collective action for consumers. The goal really for us was to understand how collective action could enhance the engagement of consumers and users in R&I projects. And the goal here is also not only to understand those, but also to understand how to structure those collective actions and then assess their involvement and their maturity. And that my colleague Diego will talk about it a little bit more in the second presentation. But first, before we start, I wanted to touch briefly on this idea that we are, on the wording that we're using inside the working group. So we talk about consumers and citizens, and why this wording of consumer and citizens, which are two very different notions, one coming from an energy market perspective and another one coming from a democratic perspective. And the goal for us really was to understand really what makes people take an active role in the energy system. Engagement is about, first and foremost, trying to get people involved, trying to get people interested, and trying to get people active. And so that for us is really a responsibility as much as a right. And so this is definitely linked with the notion of a citizen and energy citizens as we're trying to create them through research innovation projects of Horizon 2020 and now Horizon Europe. And so therefore, for us, we took the word citizens to reflect that capacity much more than consumer or customers, which were the wording that we used before, simply because we want to move towards something that is more value driven versus market driven, like the words consumer or customer are really referring to. You will see that aspect in a lot of the things that we're doing as a working group. And so I will try to first give you a bit of an idea of how we're going to organize that in terms of tackling that big piece of work, which is collective action for engagement. We decided to break ourselves down into 4 different subgroups. The reason for that is because we really wanted to, 1, have active engagement from project leaders, and 2, also making sure that we could actually take it piece by piece. Obviously, revolutionizing the way consumers are involved in research innovation project is really something that is not done in one day. And so really we wanted to have groups that were going to give concrete input into projects. And so we decided to break it into 4. The names that you can see of the leaders, each of those groups is facilitated by a subgroup leader, which you can see here, as well as their project. Diego Casado Mancilia being one of the subgroup leaders is going to present to you after me. And then we really took it in terms of 4 different steps. The first thing is the drivers and indicators. So how do we start this engagement and how do we measure it? The second part is the strategies linked to that engagement as projects. How can we find incentives, find tools and methods to try to engage people in our projects? Then the governance models. The idea, obviously, of collective action is that as soon as you have collective action, you have structures, you have organizations. And so in order to sustain that engagement through time, you need to have governance structures that are safe for everybody to participate in. And that's what the third subgroup is tackling. And then smart tools for engagement, which is really about what kind of tools are we producing as projects, what are the future services that are going to arrive in the market, and how are they really influenced by citizens that are part of research and innovation from the beginning. So first things first is to understand a little bit the process of a European project. I'm sure that most of you in the room are a participant in research innovation project, or have participated in the past, or will participate hopefully in future calls. So I think what we did as a first step of research for our working group was to take a look at the type of targets that we have in our research innovation, what type of users we have. And as you can see, it's very broad and diverse. It is diverse, yet we wanted to focus on really residential demo users. So looking at specifically the private consumers, because for us it was the most interesting ones that are the less maybe understood and supported by research innovation projects today. So our goal was really to take a look at that specific target and how could we potentially help projects engage more of those private users. And so there you can see really prosumers, energy communities, as well as individual users themselves that really are the core of that target. In terms of the production from projects, that study was conducted by the smart tool subgroups and Diego around the type of tools that projects are building for to actually get onto the market. And what was interesting for us to understand was really the kind of different drivers that exist today. The first thing is that despite the fact that residential is the first target, collective aspects away from residential is not so much served by research innovation projects. So you can see that energy communities, for example, are very poorly represented as a target, which is really the golden standard for collective action, versus residential, meaning family unit individuals, are very much the focus of research innovation projects. And so that really led us to think, okay, we need to try to help those collective action models. Yet we see that most projects are trying to support behavior change. And behavior change is strongly correlated with collective action. We see that there are a lot of positive correlations between collective action and peer networks with the change in behavior. And so that really encouraged us in that direction again. This third thing is to really understand what were the goal behind the creation of those tools, and is to make people aware of energy issues. Once again, there we see that instead of going one by one, if we had to go by groups, it would probably be a little bit easier. And then finally, in technology readiness level, obviously projects are very much focused on the delivery of technology innovation. And you can see that this technology innovation versus some of the social innovation in most smart grid projects are very much close to market. So we are looking at tools that would potentially have a strong impact on the market down the line. Yet it was interesting for us through our discussions already last year to understand that the social innovation part, the engagement part, was not so strong on the other hand, and that somehow impaired the final results of those projects to really reach the market and have a concrete impact on our dives day to day. So what were the two lessons out of those two slides? This was really to think, okay, how exactly can we structure collective action? And so for that, there were three main gaps that appeared to us last year. A gap in approaches. There is a lack of clear goals in terms of the consumer engagement. So it was really to, most projects are focusing on the individual when really we see a lot of benefits to collective action models. And specifically, there is a lack of specific strategies per user type. The goal is that project needed to really explore the different type of users that they were interacting with and how exactly they can shape the different strategies based on the different type of users. The second gap is in terms of tools and methods. And there it's really a lack of simply knowledge. Most projects are composed by highly technical partners, partners that usually have a very deep understanding of the energy system at a technical level, but somehow maybe less of an understanding of the day-to-day life, the business of consumers themselves. What is their day-to-day or daily their daily lives simply. And so the goal here was for us to understand that we need to also create this awareness around social innovation as much as technical innovation. And then finally, the last gap is the gap in diversity. Most of the user profiles that are used in research innovation projects are mostly early adopters. And it was interesting for us to really take a look at how could we expand that base? How could we look at maybe people, organizations that are not necessarily early adopters, but really that scale this activity to other target groups that could potentially be interesting to learn from, underrepresented communities, to avoid the gender bias, to avoid the income gap. All those things that are not so much tackled today in smart grid research and innovation projects, but that maybe there is a will from bridge initiatives to really go in that direction and expand the consumer base. So what did we do in terms of understanding that collective aspect? Well, the first thing is that we wanted to investigate collective action models. And so for that, we did two things. We looked at first how to create those collective organizations. How did project tackle that, or at least successful project tackle that? And then we looked at also, positive points versus negative points, effort versus output. The first part was really to take a look at the legal environment and then the statutes environment in the pilot. So most European projects have pilots that are allowing them to test their tools into the market or into real life situations. And so for that, we saw that it was really interesting to have projects that had already a pre-existing citizen-led organization. What we mean by citizen-led is an organization that allows citizens, that allows consumers to participate directly in order to facilitate that link between research and innovation, while at the same time creating a visibility for project partners, created a person to talk to, a contact point. And so most of the successful engagement methodologies that we've seen in bridge initiatives were linked to a certain form of citizen-led organization involved in the project. In terms of the three things that were really important for setting up those organizations, the first thing is the governing role. I think it was interesting for us to take a look at the type of rules that were put in place, and most of them had the one member, one vote rule. It's not all of them. Some of them are different types of governance system. However, if you are driving engagement, if you want really every single person to be involved in the collective, then it's easier to bypass that by providing the same voice to everybody. In terms of representative institutions, so the presence of a representative institution allowing for citizens to directly input into the project was really something that was very strong in terms of creating a driver, an incentive for the project to also participate and have that participation process. And then the third point was information and transparency. And then the goal was not only to have an information, but it doesn't have to be huge. It just had to be basic, just simply to actually make sure that the setup that was created by the project could continue and inform members through time in order to have not only an opportunity to participate, but even if you do not want to participate or if your interests drop, you can continue following up the project and then re-enter at a later point. So how are consumers engaged? There are 4 stages of engagement or 4 pieces of the engagement that consumers can have in a research innovation project. Those 4 pieces are participation, representation, accountability, and deliberation. Participation is very concretely actually having an input into the project, participating into the deliverables. And there, what we see is that if you have a citizen-centered focus, you need to have a robust process of participation. That means going back systematically to consumers in order to ask them for feedback, in order to ask them to participate, pull them in to have them make concrete action. And we see more and more research and innovation projects take that approach of concretely including consumers directly into the project process. In terms of the technology focus, on the other hand, what we saw is that projects that were more technology focused were usually driving information, but not necessarily having the feedback, having a concrete impact on the project plan. And so the information, the top-down information part is something that unfortunately is still very much used by projects, but we are trying to move towards something that is much more participative. The second piece is representation. In order to have this kind of formal dialogue between a citizen-led organization or a citizen-led movement and a research innovation project, there needs to be a buffer. There needs to be a kind of a facilitation service. And so there, the goal was that if you create a mechanism, an institutional mechanism of representation, like it's the case in energy communities, for example, but you can also use that in cooperatives, in associations, you allow people to concretely have that information be translated to them by this institution. And so we saw a lot of very positive feedback on that end. On the other hand, technology-focused projects were mostly having sample representation, so simply, naming people, picking people at random, and that we see is not so successful in terms of really driving through the lessons of the project or making people, enhancing the participation of consumers. In terms of accountability, the goal really is to create specific accountability for institutions. So obviously, it's not too much to ask people to be accountable for results. Actually, what we see is that certain projects or certain organizations went as far as to require accountability from their members. Obviously, it's not necessarily a best practice. It's a bit extreme, but we see that accountability is also part of the process, and so it's really needed to have that dialogue, that adult dialogue with users that you're trying to engage. And then once again, on the technology focus side, most projects actually had a very top-down approach and simply stopped at information, not wanting to go further on accountability simply because they were not willing to trade also the control that goes with the accountability. And then finally on the deliberation, so the actual focus of participation, so the discussion with users. There again, if you have a citizen-centric focus, you're trying to have continuous training and involvement of consumers, which is taking a lot of effort. And so most projects that we have interviews that are looking at a citizen-centric focus had to invest more resources into creating those training programs, creating those facilitation services to really allow for the citizen base to mature collectively and understand better the topics that we're talking about. And so that was a big process that they had to invest in, but down the line also yielded results in terms of the 3 first points that we talked about. On the other side, the technology focused project did not focus on continuous involvement or training simply because if it's just a top-down information, we saw that most projects did not try to check if they were understood, but simply provided information. So as you can see, definitely collective action is bringing something to the table in terms of research and innovation. But how exactly is this possible beyond the pieces that I've showed you before? Well, we had a couple of concrete recommendations that were brought forward already during the report last year on how exactly to do that, both in terms of programming and in terms of project making as well. The first one is really to have a formalized engagement strategy that is targeting specific users and specific communities, so to integrate the collective action models directly into your project. The second one is to obviously work with community initiative already existing. It's very long and hardest to actually create a bottom-up approach. And so to work with initiatives that already represent that might be a good practice. Work with specific organizational structures that are creating that engagement. Obviously, it's more effort and it's more resources to have an actual dialogue with consumers and citizens, but it also yields the actual results that makes the engagement sustainable through time and will make the project go beyond the project duration. It's not when suddenly, the funding or the granting stops that somehow the project is not moving forward. That's when really the organizational structure that you built during the project are continuing through. And we've seen some good example of that in the Bridge project. Provide adapted procedures for community energy initiatives. So that, of course, is linked to the fact that it's more a recommendation for regulators at the national level. It's important as a project to be drivers of those specific procedures and to support the adaptation of those procedures for community energy initiatives. Use different indicators depending on the maturity level. And I think Diego will talk about that specifically, but that was a really important lesson for us in terms of understanding that initiatives are not necessarily growing, they are maturing. And so instead of being a vertical process, it's really a horizontal process of growth where the community is deepening and the value created locally is deepening as well, but not necessarily growing in number or in services. It's simply the fact that we are getting to a better understanding, we're getting to a deeper relationship, deeper connection with local communities. Create people-centric solution versus technology-centric solution. I think the previous slide was explaining that pretty much. It's really maybe not about one or the other, but maybe one with the other, which is something that we're trying to work on this year with the group. Include more evidence-based engagement methodologies. So that Diego is going to tackle after that. So I'm not going to talk too much about it. And then once again, and that's the last recommendation that we had as a group, was to drive away from market focus to more value focus. We are research innovation projects, although we want to create down the line tools and methods and services that are going to impact the market in a positive way and really compete. It's important also in the research innovation process to not necessarily take a market approach, but rather a value approach and consider what really brings value at the local level. So out of the solutions, what are we looking for in this year's work of the Bridge project on the Bridge working group on consumer and citizen engagement? Well, the first thing is that we will do a broad data collection campaign to try to get more specific information from Bridge projects. So we published a questionnaire actually at the beginning of the week that is going to look at really qualifying what each project of the initiative is actually doing in terms of consumer engagement and how those can be maybe shaped or nudged in the right direction in terms of creating more citizen-centric engagement, more collective action engagement. The second piece is an engagement strategy guide that is looking at continuing the work that we did from last year and the recommendation that I gave you just now. The third part is market integration for energy communities. Why those specific organizational form of energy communities? Because we think that it's important to emphasize the gold standard that are energy communities. Energy communities is a concept that is now being driven through the transposition process at the national level and will create opportunities for research innovation projects across Europe. Obviously, it's a different form of organization, but we see that it's a perfect partner in terms of creating collective action models. And so we really encourage research innovation projects to take a look at energy communities, to drive energy communities in their right format, to also let them be what they are, which is really governance at the service of the citizen base. So they are not necessarily a market-driven tool, but they are really a locally driven, consumer-centric, value-driven organizational form. And then finally, a smart tool repository, really looking at then the incentive strategies that are used by projects. We want to try and refine or get the best practices from projects in terms of the type of incentive strategy that worked, and then how could we potentially reuse them in other projects down the line. That is all for me. Thank you very much. And I see that Thomas is still there. I didn't change your email, but I will correct that and send you the slides later on, and I'll pass on the word to Diego.
Yes, thank you very much, Stanislas, Chair of the Bridge Consumer and Citizen Engagement Working Group. I just want to say that we have had 2 questions in the chat. We encourage you to ask more questions, and the questions will be asked. We will try to ask the questions in the panel discussion after every presentation has been completed. So next speaker, Diego, welcome.
Hi, Matt. Thank you very much. I was even actually changing my email in the last slide as I also forgot to do that. So let me share my screen. I think that it is up. Can you see my presentation in full screen? Yeah.
Yes, I see.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Again, well, first, Matt, and also Stan, because you really introduced many different topics that I will try to tackle here regarding to the work that we have been doing on the engagement strategies in the past year. So, well, I'm coming from the University of Deusto in Spain. Coming from the Bridge, I'm representing the parity projects, and also I doing my research in another European project, which is not an ICT project, but is also in energy consumption and energy communities, which is the Y project. So the last year I was well, let's say the leader or the coordinator of the Smart Tools for Engagement group. This year I have passed the ball to another colleague, but I still usually to participate on the Smart Tool. My email that in the last slide will be also there. It's on it's here. So in my presentation today, I will try to bring something that Stan has emphasized in the previous presentation, which is that usually the researchers of the Bridge Initiative projects usually do not know how to conduct maybe a good engagement strategy, and the reasons why we find that maybe this difficulty is because the bridge projects are mostly ICT-based projects with many people involved coming from the energy sectors, ICT sectors, technology sectors, and so usually the social sciences, behavioral sciences, and user understanding are sometimes out of the scope of the knowledge of some of the partners. So I will try to provide a framework that we have used not only in several projects in which I have been participating, which is namely Green Soul, Y, and Parity, but also because we use that methodology for trying to streamline the different projects on the Bridge Initiative. So, as I said before, so the main goal when we have to really provide an engagement is to understand why do we want to engage someone for what, and we have to first wonder and ask ourselves what is the main goal that we already have. For instance, in energy projects, that would be, for instance, that the people install more energy meters on their homes, or they make their houses more energy efficient by doing some investment. Other goals would be that the people will be more aware about the sustainable issues and the climate change situations. Other goal that would be the decarbonization of islands or to create energy communities. So the goals would be very different, and for that reason, the different engagement strategies, of course, will be completely different. So, but regarding of these different approaches that we may have to tackle when it comes to decide what are the engagement strategies that we want to follow, we have to try to find frameworks or models that help us to guide the way in which we are going to work in the different projects. And for that, I have done a short review of the state of the art on some of the projects that I have been familiar with. And I will present to you some approaches that for me were very interesting. So the first one, it is what I call the funnel approach. The funnel approach, of course, is like this ice cream in which we have to understand the users, the people, the citizens, consumers, all these different names, sorry, to really trying to tunnel them for the broad audience to really to give them the final chocolate bit, as you can see on the bottom of the funnel. So in this kind of approaches, so the first engagement strategy, or the first way that we have to do, is to try to attract attention, and then one that we can really attract the attention of the people, we have to provide more information which is more familiar for the people, or maybe we have to try to tunnel, as I said before, provide information more in a way that can be more familiar and more likely for the users that we have. And for that, something which is very, very, very important for this top of the funnel until the chocolate bit is to really understand who are the people behind the engagement strategy that we would like to pursue. Another strategy, this is another way of approaching the users, is to go from the top-down approach, which is very typical overall in energy communities and energy markets, which is let's try to first target the recruitment, understand who are our citizens, our consumers, and then try to find the engagement tactics that can be useful for those people, as Stan was explaining before. Then another stage would be the education and awareness, and then whenever we have already identified the people, we know what would be the engagement tactics that we can use, and that we have all the people aware, we can start with something that mimics or is very close to the engagement, which is the behavior change approaches and the behavioral approaches that we have to use for strengthening the participation or the collective action of families, individuals, or collectives in the energy transition. And finally, of course, see and understand which were the outcomes. Another kind of approach that I have also found is the linear approach, in which all of them, as you can see, are quite very similar, but maybe only change the shape in which we present the information. But I like this this kind of many different ways of presenting the information. So the one that I presented here is the one which is unfreeze, change, and refreeze. Maybe some of you know this model of engagement or behavior change, because it is well known by some of the social scientists and behavioral scientists that could be here in today's session. So in the first part, as you can see, we have to first recognize the need for the change, determine what needs to be changed, as I said before, the goal, which is the most important things, then encourage the replacement of all behaviors and attitudes. So it is not always to change the behavior, but to understand why we have a behavior and to try to confront our behavior or our engagement strategy with our beliefs and values, for instance. Then to ensure that there is a strong support from the management and so forth. So then we can, of course, do the change. And something which is very important is that we can not only think that we will change the people mindsets just because we gave to them a very good incentive or because we engage them in a very meaningful manner, but we have to really try to see that these changes really stick for the longer. And then it will be only when we will be able to celebrate the success in the refreeze phase. Another approach is the one which is logarithmic, and this one is very close to the one that I'm going to present today, in which this logarithmic approach, we can see some stages through the balls or balloons, which are here from the small to the smaller to the bigger. So first, we have always to make the people aware about what is the current situation, to see what would be the strategies to educate more to the people for the issues that we would like to tackle or to change. Then, of course, provide the behavioral change strategies, and finally maximize the engagements. And if it's in terms of energy consumption, maybe the savings, the cost, or other kind of KPIs that we would have defined on the different projects that we have. Finally, the one that we are going to present, this is the one that we use for the engagement, collective engagement group in the Bridge Initiative, which was the stages of behavior change, and I call it a ladder approach. So it is very close to the logarithmic approach that I have presented before, but as you can see here, there are specific phases in which different collectives, individuals, families, or other kind of unit of analysis could be in terms of engagement or behavior. And as you can see here, we have a phase which is the pre-contemplation, then another one which is contemplation, another one which is preparation, another one which is action, and the top of the ladder, which is the maintenance. So which is how we can work to sustain the behavior change that has been already acquired. Well, all these different approaches that I have presented to you, it is very likely that most of you, even including myself, we come from a more technical background, and maybe you can understand better these models to using the maturity level and the technological readiness level, that it is a way of understanding how a tool, an ICT asset that we provide will evolve and will mature depending of different validations or different improvements that we do throughout the time. So this way of progressing from the idea until the full commercial application will be something that we can mimic from the behavioral sciences in any of the frameworks that I have presented before. So coming again from the ladder approach, so in theoretical level, the name is TTM, which is the trans-theoretical model of behavior change. Initially, it was used for the health environment or the health domain to help the people to quit smoking or to quit drinking. But then we have seen that some colleagues in the different universities and research labs have used and apply this model also for the energy transition. So as I said before, on the top of the ladder are the people who are really to do the change, and we would really like to maintain the change that they have acquired throughout the time. But at the at the very start point of the ladder are the people who can be maybe negationists, or the people who think that there are no problems with the environment or the energy transitions and so forth. So as we can see here, the people, as Stan said, can evolve, can upgrade, can progress, and we can not see that everyone will be up to the ladder, but maybe some of them, the collectives, would be very nice if they really finally understand that there is a problem and they would like to change that. So putting the logarithmic approach and the trans-theoretical model approach together, we can see that depending on the different stages in which the people are, we can provide to them different ways of engagement. And what it is very important is to understand our people, our consumers, our citizens. We have to learn from them to really understand in which level they are. Okay, Matt, I see yourself, so I will try to speed up. So the challenges, I will repeat from the words from Stan. So the first one is diversity. So the one size doesn't fit all. It's something that we have to really understand, and we cannot treat all the individuals or families or collectives as in the same way. So we have to really conduct with them more qualitative approaches based on the evidence and the specific specificities, characteristics of their of the culture, or as I said before, beliefs, values, and so forth. Them. So there are engagement is good. The frameworks that I have presented are good, but of course there are always barriers for that prevent the engagement of the people. And finally, it is very nice when someone presents a framework for progressing to the ladder, to be the an advocate of the climate action, but usually that needs investment, not only in money but also in time. So just some pills that, and I will go very quickly for this part. So some things that we did in the past in different projects, for instance, from the diversity part, we tried to use categorization based on behavioral traits of the population. Well, there are many strategies overall. For those of you who are in the marketing, with segmentation, for instance, we can find different ways to try to categorize or to cluster people on different traits, to not treat or not to address the same strategy to different people. Then another thing that we did in another project, specifically in parity, was to really understand what would be the barriers for, in the case of the project, the parity, to join local flexibility markets. And as you can see here, we found different clusters and a taxonomy of the different barriers that someone can encounter when they would like to join really an energy initiative. So by using the barriers, we can then define what would be the engagement strategies. And finally, in the Y projects, what we are really trying to understand, it is what led the people to really make investments for the energy transition in 4 different domains, which are the building domain, the everyday appliances domain, the flexibility domain, and the mobility domain. And we are trying to really, by using the transvertical model, we try to know what are the drivers that help different people to progress from one stage to another in each of the different domains that I have explained before. To conclude, stages of change can be used for collective action in different ways. 4 ways that I propose to you as an evaluation methodology. So the question that we can answer are the users more engaged than, before, with pre-post tests? We can help to better understand the users and communities. Where are they in relation to the engagement and what really they need? So that would be another way to use the models. To understand drivers and barriers that prevent or help to advance, relapse, or get stuck in the ladder, in some stages of the ladder. And finally, to understand what are the main determinants to be used when aiming and clustering people in one of the different stages. The final slide map is stages of change, and this is an important message, should be considered as a conceptual heuristic for understanding how action groups grow, but not as a fixed and directional sequence that is strictly followed by a step-by-step process, which we have to really use in a very deterministic way. Specific stages may be skipped, advanced may become to stop, processes within a stage might be repeated until resolved, or the action group may relapse to an earlier stage with in a way which is normal as the life it is. So we cannot just go for a very mechanical way of thinking, but we have just to use this kind of methodologies just as a way to understand the people, but not to really stick to the frameworks and be more open in the mind. So thank you for your time. And my mail here is decasado@deusto.es. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diego. A lot of good tools to get people engaged with, especially perhaps the ice cream cone. I was thinking of my own home. It's a nice way to get people engaged there. Next speaker is Thomas Mikkelsen, CEO and founder of Gecko Global and chair of the Bridge Joint Communication Task Force. Welcome. You're on mute, Thomas.
Now it should be better.
Yeah, I can hear you.
And you can see the presentation as well.
Yes, I do.
Very good. So the last presentation before we go into the discussion is then actually taking all the very good things that my colleague have just shared now and look into what is it actually that we've learned then during the crisis for the past 1.5 years, and also more overall in relation to what are the actual actionable tactics that we can do and what we have been doing in the projects over the past years, both before and under the corona crisis. However, let me just start out by giving you some numbers, because all of us, we probably know it, we felt it, but the truth is that until now, so until May, we had only 1/3 of the travel that we were used to, and only then the travel was very national, so not international, and we're only very slowly progressing towards more traveling. It means basically that what we have all experienced is that encounters has turned into something digital, and you can see the numbers again here from 10 million a day in December 2019. In May 2020, so only some months after, it has risen to 300 million. So it was like an immense number of digital encounters that we were all of a sudden had to change to relate to. Everything related to engagement all of a sudden had to take place digitally. And of course, this change have made an impact on all, and we have learned a lot. A key problem with the digital communication tools is that actually it takes a lot more effort for us. Maybe we are not knowledgeable about this, but when you are doing the psychological tests, actually we see that the cognitive load is much higher when we are online, and it actually is such that when we are doing video chats, when we are seeing each other and we have this eye-to-eye, constantly real time, we are actually being fatigued, and probably many of you have experienced this. And it means also that basically we've felt this intensity of being much more on, so we've been much more tired. And actually, it's also been so that even though we felt that we could move from one meeting to the other with only like 30 seconds between them, it has actually meant that when you do research about it, people are not really engaged in the end. So the thing that we are missing in relation to this, alongside, of course, the fact that we might even lose concentration, is that we're also missing things that goes on within our brains. The oxytocin release that actually comes from being able to touch someone, talk to someone, seeing, feeling them, is not coming. So you're getting more tired and you're losing basically that hormone to get you in a balance in a situation which we have known that is actually there to sustain cooperation, to feel better with being with people. So these are real challenges. And the kind of thing that we've all turned into, like this one, is the webinar, the killer application of all time. The thing, however, is that what we've seen is that they are effective. We all turned into them. We are able to reach a very high number of audience, and we've seen many more of them during the pandemic. However, when we are then looking into the numbers beneath them, the fact is that the actual engagement time that we maybe on paper and in our calculations seem to have had is actually not true. We can see that the people that are then spending their time looking at presentations, webinars, we are actually back to the fact that 2 webinars a week is the maximum that people can actually cope with. And then you're adding to the fact that we are also participating in 4, 5, 6, 7 meetings a day on a digital manner. So basically the fatigue and the lack of the hormones that are stimulating us to actually become engaged, knowing people, is basically all factors that we will have to relate to, and we need probably to go back and say, webinars, all the digital means are very good. We just need to understand what other means is there also. However, let's take a few looks then on the statistics before we go into the key learnings of what we can do in order to come about the fact that digital means are not the only thing that we will have to do in the future. the thing is that when we are talking about webinars, we are trying a lot to get people to attend before, a long time before, but around a third is actually registering on the day of the webinar, 30 people just a week before. So we know again that this thing about being close is so important also when it comes to webinars. So planning many months in advance is actually not necessarily a good thing. The other thing is that we're also thinking that we can have these webinars with hundreds, thousands of people even. They are, however, very rare. When we look out there, 50 people, it's very similar to the one we are having here, is actually the number of people that are normally attending. And we also see that the thing about attending a webinar demands easy registration, and the reminder basically also just a few minutes before, unless you'll actually lose up to 30% of the people if you're not really giving them the reminder just before the show starts. Another thing is that being creative in webinars, trying to do video content, doing things which are a bit not so common is something that is very useful. It's not something that we're doing here today, I have to admit, because it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of thinking, and all of a sudden you realize that the planning, the preparation, all this stuff, it will take a lot more time. Again, you can see the difference from being there on stage, being able to interact with people, and the difference there from sitting here talking to each other. It takes a lot more effort from us presenting, and we say also that it's very important to have some numbers, to have people to relate to it so they can start thinking. We should not give all the answers in our presentations. We should, as I was trying, and you probably can see that now there in the beginning, to give some numbers to make you start thinking, oh, this is interesting. Is it really so? 1/3 only traveling. What does that mean? So you need basically to start getting people's attention about, okay, what does this mean for me? You need to get the personalized, and then you can start your conclusions. So beware of having too many conclusions of your own. You will need to get people's attention by actually getting them aboard, showing them some things that they can easily relate to and understand. We also know that when it comes to promotion, the email is absolutely the number one promotion. We even have looked at the timings. When is it that the best thing is to promote it? We know 15 days is the optional day. Again, if you want as many people as possible. We also have looked at the timing. Mondays and Tuesdays are better than any other day of the weeks. We know that before lunch is better. And then we also know that when we look at it, there normally, I said before, 2 hour max, but actually most people will not attend more than one webinar a week. So that's also something that we need to be aware of when we're trying to do this. Better with few quality webinars than many that are not like that. 50 to 60 minutes are again the best number of the length, and we also know that 90 minutes like this one is not optimal. However, we have so much interesting to say, so we thought you can take it. Okay, what is it that we then learned in the different projects? About keeping people more personally entertained in this time of COVID that we maybe can take forward also. So coordination, we've really seen that in this time, it's been even more clear how important that we have aligned messages. In the projects that we're working in, many of us in the bridge, we're a lot of different consortium partners, and it's sometimes happening that you have kind of conflicting messages to the stakeholders, to the audience. And we've seen here in the digital information age, which is COVID, that it's been so important that we are not coming up with even the slightest difference here can make a huge impact and misunderstanding. So it's very important for people to coordinate and ensure that the messaging going out is really aligned. Another thing that we have really seen is super important is that we've been working, a lot of us, as it was also said previously, to build communities. How do you do that when you're not able to go there, meet people, travel, be there physically? The thing is that we need to work a lot more with local role models. So we need to pick a few people that we're working, interacting with very, very closely, that we can build this kind of engagement with, and that can act on our behalf. And then to do that, we should keep these community leaders informed, follow up regularly, really use them as part of our interaction with people in different areas. Then one interesting thing is that surveys are normally used like something internally to report on how well is it progressing. However, what we've seen is that it's actually an activation tool. It's something which is super important to keep people oriented, engaged, part of what it is that we're doing. And I said, I saw that it was also mentioned before, the feedback basically to people that are participating, engaged, is one of the most important things. You can feel it's going well, and you can feel it's not going so well, but getting that actual direct feedback on how is it going, what are the numbers that we are actually performing, is so important that we should really keep an eye on this and use these tools much more also as part of our communication and engagement. And then offline letters. Yeah, this thing about receiving something in your normal traditional letterbox is actually something that is coming back. It's something that we're not used to anymore. So it actually means that this old traditional means of communication is getting kind of a revival. It's much more effective than it was 5-10 years ago when everybody received so much junk email or mail in their letterbox. Now you can use it. Of course, again, you need to look into it, but it's a lot active now to actually receive some physical documentation. If you use it carefully for that exact reason where you want people engaged, they have something to go back to, design it maybe even for something that you can put there on your fridge, make it look nice, everything. So again, quality over quantity also when it comes to this, but an interesting thing to learn that there is a revival here. And then one final thing, repetition. Repetition is key. We've seen sometimes in many projects, many from many learnings and experiences that, well, the thing is that we are looking into saying things and we think, okay, now they have got it. However, the fact is 1 time, 2 time, 3 time, 4 time, 5 times is normally even not enough. You really needed to get it into habits, of course, again, depending on what it is that you want to learn. Is it really just an information, or is it about changing habits? It's about to what was said really there in the beginning, that the exercise is very much about understanding what kind of engagement is it actually that you want. Is it just an information? Is it something that really demands people to be engaged, to be involved, that it can only be said too few times? So repetition is key. And yes, repetition is key. So let me say that once again. And that's all for me right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Really interesting presentation. We're running a little late. We're planning to have a panel discussion for 15 minutes. We have time for 15 minutes right now. So I will just start with sharing my screen so we can see participants. Let me see, like this, yeah. Okay, so all the participants can you just turn on your cameras? We have all the speakers still here, of course. Thank you. Okay, great. We have, what I've seen, we had 2 questions from the chat. So first of all, I think this is directed to Stanislas. Is there any connection to the Gaia X initiative yet?
Not to my knowledge. I think at least maybe it's more directed toward Christiana than towards me. But Christiana, is there a vision from the Commission to connect that with Gaia X? Not to my knowledge at this moment. Would welcome it though.
Thank you. No, yes, we are well aware of the French-German national initiative Gaia X, and of course we are looking into it to as a way to inspire us for the digitalization of energy action plans. So yeah, we are well aware.
Okay, Great. Next question. It was posed during Stanislav's session, but it might not be only for you. Is this an open working group? How can other EU projects collaborate to your endeavors? We are about to start a new Green Deal call project, which also addresses several of your engagement aspects.
Right. So let me first answer on a less formal note. I think there are two things. There is the formal bridge framework, and then there is the way we work together. And I think I speak for the entire working group to say, well, we are always happy to have new people joining in. So if you want to come in and take part in the discussion, you are of course welcome to. Please send me an email and I'll make sure that you're part of the diffusion list. So that's absolutely not a problem. There is, however, a formal answer to that question, which is that Bridge is an initiative that is actually targeting certain types of projects. And the reason why they are targeted is because they reserve a certain amount of budget in their projects to participate in the initiative. So that's all it is. But beside that, you're of course more than welcome to join. The Green Deal calls are definitely super interesting, and it would be lovely to have you guys on board in with us in the Consumer and Citizen Engagement Working Group, in other working groups of Bridge. And of course, I mean, if there's also a coordination aspect to be done between Green Deal calls, I see Christiana nodding, so maybe there is something in the tubes there as well.
Yeah, if I can just compliment, indeed, what Stan is saying is completely true. But what we have seen in the last General Assembly that we held in March, if I remember correctly, yes, we had invited other initiatives, like external projects, other platforms, because we see that it is important to strengthen this sharing experience. So in the Commission and with the Bridge Secretariat, we will continue involving external stakeholders in a flexible manner so that perhaps we can define common priority topics and synchronize the effort. So yes, feel free to reach out to Stan and I, and we will see what to do.
Yeah, thank you. Could you, all of you, talk a little bit about what is the most important learnings to give the audience on this topic? Can you agree on something?
Let me then maybe just start out by saying that I think what Diego mentioned in his presentation, that this thing about understanding what is it really that you want to achieve in relation to setting a goal for your engagement, not necessarily thinking that every engagement is the same, is a very important learning, which I think probably is underestimated in many projects where we are often working as if communication, dissemination, exploitation is currently the same thing. And we are now learning, and with the introduction of more social science, as was also said by Christiana, okay, there are actually different means, and we should probably go to this from very many different angles, and it needs to be much more incorporated in the whole project setup than just like a separate siloed kind of thing where we're just communicating what we're seeing.
Anyone else want to say something about it? Yeah, I can. Well,
from my side, yeah. So from my side, I will emphasize the idea of the making the transition just, and then so we can not only think on the end users or consumers that we usually address on the projects related to energy, so energy communities. Electric vehicles, super smart homes are very interesting target audiences for our projects, but we have also to really put the focus on other less income people and also the energy poverty issues and things like that that usually are underestimated in the engagement strategies that we usually address. So for me, that would be something important to emphasize as well.
Mm-hmm. But do you think that this is relevant to any R&I energy transition project to engage citizens, or is it just a certain kind of projects that should listen up to this?
Well, this is maybe Stan can.
Yeah, I just want to build on what Diego just said about the need for a just transition, and I think that's a super important point. And to answer your question, Matt, I think that's valid for any project. The fact that there is a diversity in users, the fact that there's diversity in consumers is valid regardless of the type of objectives, simply because down the line, we are here to serve an entire system and not just a certain category of people. And so that seems absolutely right, that a just transition mechanism must be included in every proposal. I will just nuance simply the aspect of the energy communities, because we've seen the benefits of creating energy communities with a democratic governance to have a concrete impact onto energy poverty through empowerment. Obviously, it's not the only thing that can be done, and I think Diego is absolutely right to say that there is a need to have specific mechanisms. I just think that it's one way to go about it. But once again, it's important to, and I think that's also what the Bridge project then is. It's an additional effort, but it's an effort that pays off down the line, because then it makes the project relevant beyond project duration and for the market in general. And so I think that's really something that should be taken into account more often in project proposals.
Diego, did you want to add something to it, or was it the first?
I think that was everything said. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So talking about, I'd like to mention my own project, FlexiGrid, which I'm working with communications in. We're just about to start one of our demo sites in eastern Bulgaria, and they're putting smart meters in people's homes. What should they do turning to Bridge? How can they use your knowledge in the best possible way right now? Who want to answer?
Should I go for it? And Diego, you can maybe compliment. So first, congratulations, Matt, on the new project. Exciting stuff.
Oh, it's a new demo site. The project's been going on for a while, but it's the demo site's just starting up.
Awesome. I think the first thing is in terms of the lessons learned that we've built in the initiative is the role of the Bridge initiative is to pool knowledge. So definitely, I think we can help you guys out in that you will see the experiences from other projects, right? And that's our goal as an initiative, to really pull the knowledge in. In terms of concrete experience that we've built in the initiative on strategies of engagement, really the goal is not only to, like you said, put smart meters in people's homes, but rather create a sustainable way people can get involved and actually impact the results of the project. One of the things that we decided to take into focus in the working group on consumer and citizen engagement is how can you organize people collectively through meetings, through providing them with an opportunity, through providing them with a voice actually, in order to really spread the message of the project and participate in the makeup of, for example, the use cases, the output, what can they get out of it. And so really the goal is to, one, provide that infrastructure to make sure that they can participate from the get-go, and two, be also ready to provide them with ownership on what's happening. Look at, local value. What are they going to get at the end of the project? Why do they need to work with you? And I'm sure that FlexiGrid has a very, very forward-looking objective. I do not know the project personally, but I'm sure that's the case. And so the goal is really to say, well, one, what are we trying to achieve? What could benefit the local community? And down the line, through this infrastructure that you have built for collective action, then how do you then collaborate? Not necessarily top-down provide solutions, but really collaborate on a common solution together with the local community. And I'm sure that then down the line, you will see that this pilot will not only become relevant for you guys, but also become relevant for the region in Bulgaria, which I know is not extremely developed in terms of community development. So it's also interesting to do that. I mean, out of the top of my head, I just happens to know that there is a lot of movements right now in Bulgaria as the transposition process is progressing. And so there are a lot of NGOs, organizations, municipalities that are looking at this concept and could potentially be very happy to discuss with you as well what type of actions to take with the local community.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Maybe I can also just comment on this, and it can also be an answer to one of the questions there, whether there is a handbook. So before Stan actually took over the chair of the working group, I was the rapporteur, and one of the final things that we did was actually to create a handbook, and it's available online on the Bridge website. So I'll provide a link here in the chat for everyone actually to go in there and download it. So there is a lot of things there also to learn about. How can you go about what are the most important things that we have also seen both Diego and Stan providing here, learnings from across the different projects. So grouping it all together, how do you do segmentation? How do you do the best customer analysis? How do you go about engaging and entertaining people basically along the way?
Thank you very much. I just want to say we have about 3 or 4 minutes left. Christiana, can you talk a little bit about how this knowledge is transferred and has effect on policy in the European Commission?
Of course, yes. I mean, thank you for giving me the chance to remind everybody how important project results for policy making are. I mean, we have started a dedicated work in Cluster 5 in Horizon Europe on improving the feedback to policy exercise to make sure that projects and programs help providing the evidence-based needed throughout the overall policy cycle. And the importance of the evidence-based policy has been widely recognized as an imperative to ensure accountability and transparency. It is very important that we avoid any loss of knowledge and meaningful policy relevant information that are generated through EU-funded projects, but in general, Bridge. I mean, we sit on so much evidence provided by these projects. So everything that Bridge does and the way they interact and they share the results is very important for us. I mean, I invite you all to be very conscious, more conscious than usual, that what is happening at the policy level, it will impact your work. So it means that any feedback that we can take from Bridge is very valuable. So we see a clear added value in the Bridge initiative and in cooperation with what the European Commission is doing as a real good source of information to design the policies of the future and the future R&I programs, like, for example, the work program 2023-2024. We will engage a discussion with Bridge. It's very relevant.
Thank you very much. We should conclude this session now. I think we have 1 minute left. Thomas, would you like to say some closing words?
Yes,
Then
thank you very much, Matt.
goodbye.
So thanks a lot for all the words. I think we've came a long way, both from understanding from Christiana that we are actually now taking it seriously. It's been kind of a journey to go here and emphasizing the importance of now social sciences also as part of the more technical work. That's super good. And we are going there now with a lot of knowledge. We have now been doing Bridge for several years. We've thought a lot, we've learned a lot. We're going much further now. And I guess one of the next steps is actually to see that the next reports, the next proposals and the work now that we are going is much more integrated between the more technical side and the social scientific side, which will provide fantastic solutions, I guess, for the future. So that is my key takeaway, together with what I said before, that setting up the goals of what we want to achieve with our engagement is super important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Thomas, and thank you all for participating today at this USEV session hosted by Bridge on the theme Bringing Citizens on Board the Energy Transition. The recordings will be sent to you all after this session by email. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for attending.
Bye-bye.
Yes, bye.